Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Caffeinated Musings, the podcast. I'm Bilal, and I'm glad you decided to join me today, sharing another reflection with me. Today, we're diving into something that affects all of us, cutting through the noise of life. I'm not just talking about the obvious noise, the buzz of social media, endless emails, and constant notifications. I'm talking about the deeper kind, the kind that makes us feel like we're constantly moving but getting nowhere. Imagine this scenario with me. It's a fresh Monday morning. You wake up, and before your feet even touch the floor, your brain is already bombarded with everything waiting for you: work tasks, family responsibilities, deadlines, and maybe even the expectations you've set for yourself. It's like drowning before you even have a chance to catch a breath. And isn't it strange that these are precisely the moments when we need clarity the most, yet it feels the hardest to find? That's what today's episode is about: finding the life equation that works for you. This isn't about a universal formula or magic solution that works for everyone, because the truth is, your life equation is unique. It's about figuring out what you need to add to your life to bring you fulfillment and what you need to subtract to find peace. You see, for a long time, I believed that if I could plan my life to the last detail, I'd have clarity. That if I could just see every step in front of me, everything would fall into place. But life has a funny way of shuffling those steps, doesn't it? And in my journey, I realized that clarity isn't about predicting the future or having it all figured out. It's about creating space to breathe, to think, and to be who you truly are without all the clutter. Think of your life like a mathematical equation. You have constants, the things that give you stability and meaning. You also have variables, the things that change, shift, and evolve. And then there's the noise, the unnecessary parts that just complicate everything. Today, I want us to talk about how to simplify that equation, to find out what truly matters and let go of everything that doesn't. It's not a theoretical exercise. I've been working on my own equation for quite a while, taking a step back from the noise, reflecting and getting clear on what brings me joy and fulfillment. And in this episode, I'm going to share my experiences, my lessons, and practical ways for you to do the same. So grab a cup of coffee, find a comfortable spot, and let's dive into the life equation. Let's figure out how to simplify, how to subtract the noise, and how to truly add value to our lives. Let's start with a question. What is clarity really, and how do we find it? Recently, I decided to step back from a role that didn't align with my values. I realized that everything I had been doing was more about meeting expectations, some of mine, but mostly those set by others. I had built something significant, but I was doing it on terms that weren't truly my own. I was busy, yes, but was I fulfilled? That question haunted me until I decided to take a step back, to hit pause, reflect, and recalibrate. In those moments of recalibration, I discovered something. Clarity isn't about having all the answers in advance or knowing exactly where each road will take you. It's about creating space. The funny part is that I didn't plan for any of this reflection, recalibration, and space-creating journey. But I noticed that creating space is about listening, about recognizing what feels right and true, and giving that room to grow. And that's what we rarely do: create space in a world that constantly demands more of us. Perceive life as a garden. There are beautiful, nourishing plants that we want to nurture. These are our values, our passions, the things that bring us peace. But like any garden, there are also weeds. The weeds are the noise, the unnecessary commitments, the shoulds that drain us rather than nourish us. To find clarity, we have to weed that garden regularly. We have to pull out what's choking the life out of our purpose. One of the most powerful tools I've found for weeding my own garden is journaling. There's something transformative about putting pen to paper, or in my case, Apple Pencil, to iPad. Getting all the clutter in my mind out into the open where I can actually see it. When we keep everything bottled up in our heads, it feels endless and chaotic. But when we write it down, we can begin to categorize, prioritize, and understand it. The act of writing is often the act of releasing. I found immense clarity in simply being honest with myself on the page without any judgment. Take a moment and ask yourself, what's taking up unnecessary space in your life? Is it the constant pressure to hustle? Is it digital distractions? Or maybe even relationships that are more draining than uplifting? Identifying the noise is the first step to cutting through it. When we recognize our own sources of clutter, we can begin to make conscious decisions about what stays and what goes. It's not always easy to see those weeds for what they are, especially when they've been growing alongside the things we value for so long. Sometimes we don't even notice them until we make an effort to step back and look at the bigger picture. I want you to think of this process not as a one-time purge, but as an ongoing practice, a regular audit of what's truly serving you and what isn't. Because clarity isn't something you find once and keep forever. It's something you cultivate consistently, like tending to that garden. So let's start there, finding clarity in the clutter, one weed at a time. Now I would like to talk about noise, the kind that makes us feel like we're busy but keeps us from feeling fulfilled. Noise is one of the biggest barriers to clarity, and it comes in many forms. Sometimes it's external noise, the endless pings of our phone, the emails piling up in our inbox, the constant notifications from social media. This kind of noise is easy to identify. It's the physical distractions that constantly pull us away from the present moment. But then there's the internal noise, and that's often the hardest to deal with. It's the voice in our heads telling us we're not enough, that we need to do more, be more, achieve more. It's the expectations we've internalized from our families, our workplaces, and society as a whole. For me, this internal noise was the hardest to recognize and the hardest to overcome. It took years for me to realize that a lot of my drive came from a place of needing to prove myself, not only to others, but to myself as well. Internal noise is subtle. It's the story we tell ourselves about who we should be and what success looks like, and often it runs so deep that we don't even recognize it's there. I remember being at the height of my career, working with incredible people, managing important projects, and yet feeling a constant sense of restlessness. It was like no matter what I achieved, it wasn't enough. And the more I listened to that noise, the further I got from what truly mattered. One of the biggest realizations I had during this time was that external noise often feeds on internal noise. The more insecure or restless we feel, the more we reach for distractions to numb that discomfort. It's like trying to silence one noise by creating another. It doesn't work. And in the end, we just end up feeling overwhelmed. I want you to think about the role noise plays in your life. When you're sitting in silence, what thoughts come up? Is it the to-do list that won't end, the fear of missing out, or the worry that you're not living up to someone's expectations? Take a moment to reflect on that. Recognizing the noise is the first step in quieting it. The goal isn't to eliminate noise entirely. That's impossible in the world we live in. The goal is to understand it, to be aware of it, and to learn how to turn down the volume when it gets too loud. One of the ways I've managed my own internal noise is by actively practicing self-compassion. When I catch myself in that cycle of I should be doing more or I'm not enough, I pause, take a deep breath, and remind myself that I am doing the best I can. It sounds simple, but it's one of the hardest things to do, especially when you've spent your entire life driven by expectations. Another way to manage noise is to set boundaries, not just with others, but with yourself. I started setting specific times during the day where I check my emails and social media instead of constantly being on my phone. But more importantly, I set internal boundaries. I gave myself permission to take breaks, to step away when things felt too overwhelming, and to prioritize my mental well-being over someone else's idea of productivity. It's also helpful to redefine what productivity means. We live in a culture that glorifies being busy, and sometimes the noise comes from our own attachment to that busyness. We measure our worth by how much we do, rather than how present we are in what we're doing. And the truth is, productivity doesn't mean doing everything. It means doing the things that matter and doing them well. So, take some time today or this week to reflect on the noise in your life, both external and internal. What's keeping you from being present? What's keeping you from feeling fulfilled? And what can you do to start turning down the volume? Remember, noise is inevitable, but how you manage it is entirely within your control. By recognizing it, setting boundaries, and practicing self-compassion, you can start to bring more peace and clarity into your life, one moment at a time. You've probably heard the saying that less is more, but how often do we actually live by it? In a world that rewards accumulation, more achievements, more possessions, more commitments, the idea of actively subtracting things from our lives can feel counterintuitive. But when it comes to finding clarity, subtraction is often more powerful than addition. For me, the concept of subtraction started to take root when I started spending time with myself. I suddenly felt disconnected. It wasn't until I started letting go of some of those things that I began to feel a sense of freedom and clarity. It's like I had been carrying a heavy backpack, filled with rocks, each rock representing an obligation, a commitment, or an expectation. And the more rocks I carried, the harder it became to move forward. The only way to find relief was to start removing them one by one. Subtraction is about identifying the things in your life that are weighing you down and deciding consciously to let them go. It might mean saying no to opportunities, suggestions, or even people that don't align with your true values. It might mean stepping back from relationships that are more draining than nurturing. It could even mean rethinking the way you spend your time, letting go of the belief that you need to be constantly productive in order to be worthy. One of the most transformative practices I've incorporated into my life is creating a stop doing list. We're all familiar with to-do lists. They help us organize, prioritize, and get things done. But a stop doing list is just as important, if not more so. It's a list that forces you to take a hard look at everything you're doing and ask yourself, is this adding value to my life, or is it simply adding noise? When I first started creating a stop doing list, I wrote down things like stop attending meetings that don't require my input, stop saying yes out of guilt, and even stop saying no to myself. The effect was immediate. By subtracting the unnecessary, I created space for what truly mattered. I had more time for meaningful work, more energy for my family, and more room for creativity. In today's world, there's a fear that if we do less, we'll fall behind, or that we'll miss out on opportunities. But what if doing less is exactly what helps us focus on the opportunities that truly matter? What if removing the unnecessary is the key to amplifying the things that make our lives meaningful? Think of subtraction as pruning a tree. A tree doesn't grow stronger by letting every single branch flourish. It grows stronger when you cut away the weaker, unnecessary branches, allowing the core to grow robust. Similarly, by subtracting the things that don't serve us, we can direct our energy toward what truly helps us thrive. I want you to try this. Take some time to write down the things that have been draining your energy, commitments, tasks, relationships that aren't adding value. Create your own stop doing list and commit to letting go of just one thing this week. See how it feels. Notice the space it creates, not just in your schedule, but in your mind. Remember, it's not about abandoning responsibility. It's about consciously deciding what deserves your time and energy. Subtraction is a courageous act of self-respect. It's saying, I value my time, my well-being, and my purpose enough to let go of what doesn't serve me. There's a powerful lesson I learned about clarity and purpose from someone who meant a lot to me. My late mentor, my coach, my brother, and my friend, Matthew. I met Matthew during my time at the Hoffman process in 2015, and he was not just a coach or teacher. He was a guide who helped me navigate some of the toughest questions about life, work, and self-worth. When I lost Matthew in the fall of 2024, it was not only a personal loss, but also a profound reminder of the value of his teachings. Matthew had this incredible way of showing me that the answer wasn't always about doing more. Sometimes it was about being more. One of the most impactful lessons he shared was about the value of solitude, which we discussed in depth back in episode 1. In today's world, solitude often has a negative connotation. People think it means loneliness or being disconnected. But Matthew taught me that solitude is an act of courage and self-care. It's a time to connect inward, to listen to yourself without all the external chatter. I remember a particular conversation we had. I was telling him how overwhelmed I felt by the constant demands of life, how it seemed like every time I crossed something off my list, 3 more tasks appeared. I was overwhelmed, scared, and anxious. Matthew paused, smiled, and said, "Sometimes the greatest action is inaction. Sometimes the best way to move forward is to stop moving and let everything settle." It was a concept I struggled with. How could I achieve anything by not doing? But over time, I realized that he was right. When we give ourselves permission to pause, we can see things more clearly. The constant hustle clouds our vision, and only in stillness do we find clarity. He often described solitude as the clearing of mental space. It's like walking through a forest that's grown too dense. You can't see where you're going because everything is tangled and overgrown. Solitude is about stepping away from that density, taking a moment to breathe, and letting the mental fog dissipate. It's in these quiet moments that the real work happens. Work that's less about doing and more about understanding, accepting, and aligning. One of the practical exercises Matthew encouraged me to adopt was something he called sacred pauses. It's simple, yet profound. Throughout the day, I would intentionally pause just for a few moments and take stock of what I was feeling, what I was thinking, and whether my actions were aligned with my spirit, my emotional self, my intellect, and my body. It wasn't meditation per se, but rather a moment of presence. And these sacred pauses became anchors for me, points in my day where I could recalibrate and realign. Matthew also emphasized the importance of not following someone else's blueprint. Your path is your own. He would say, don't let the world dictate the way you're supposed to move through it. This resonated deeply with me, especially in an era where we're constantly comparing ourselves to others, whether on social media, at work, or even within our own families. We often think there's a right way to do things, a formula for success that, if followed precisely, will lead us to happiness. But Matthew showed me that the only right way is your way, the one that feels authentic to you, even if it doesn't look like anyone else's. When I reflect on my journey, I realize how much of my clarity has come from letting go of societal expectations. The idea that I needed to hit certain milestones by certain ages, or that I had to constantly be on the move, achieving, producing, proving myself. Matthew helped me see that true clarity comes from within. And it's often found in those quiet, still moments when we're not trying to impress anyone or live up to anyone's standards. Matthew's influence wasn't about giving me answers. It was about giving me permission. Permission to trust myself, to step back, to subtract when I needed to, and to find strength in solitude. His wisdom continues to shape the way I approach life today. In many ways, his teachings are a constant reminder that we don't always need to be adding to our lives to make them meaningful. Sometimes, the most profound impact comes from what we're willing to let go of and from the courage to simply be in the moment with ourselves. So, as you think about your own life equation, remember that subtraction, solitude, and trusting your own path are powerful tools for finding clarity. And let's take a moment to honor those mentors, guides, and people who help us see the light in our journey. not by pointing the way, but by helping us trust ourselves enough to find it on our own. Thank you, Matthew. Let's turn our attention now to daily practices that help cultivate clarity. Clarity isn't something you stumble upon by chance, it's a practice. Just like any other habit, the more you work on it, the stronger it becomes. One of the most effective ways to build clarity is through morning rituals. I've found that the way I start my day profoundly impacts how the rest of it unfolds. For me, it starts at 5:30 a.m., an early wake-up that allows me to experience the calmness of the morning before the world gets busy. There's something sacred about that quiet time when it feels like the world is still asleep. It's in these early hours that I have space to think, to reflect, and to connect with myself before anything else demands my attention. My morning routine usually involves prayer, meditation, and journaling, followed by some intellectual reading. Prayer helps ground me. It's a moment to express gratitude, to align myself with something greater, and to remind myself of what truly matters. Meditation, on the other hand, helps clear the mind of unnecessary clutter. It doesn't have to be long. Sometimes it's just 10 minutes of focused breathing. It's amazing what even a few minutes of stillness can do to set the tone for your day. I practice meditation right after prayer, on my bedroom floor. Then there's journaling, my favorite tool for gaining clarity. The act of writing helps me untangle my thoughts and vent my anxieties. There's no structure or formality, just a stream of consciousness that allows whatever is on my mind to flow freely onto the page. Some days I write about my intentions for the day, other days I write about my fears, my doubts, or even the things I'm excited about. The key is honesty. When you're honest with yourself on the page, you begin to see things for what they are, rather than what you wish they were or fear they might be. Another daily practice that's been crucial for me is something I call conscious prioritization. It's easy to get caught up in a whirlwind of tasks, meetings, and obligations. To prevent this, I spend a few minutes each morning deciding what's most important. I ask myself, if I could only accomplish one thing today, what would make me feel fulfilled? By identifying that one thing, I set an intention that guides the rest of my day. It doesn't mean that other tasks aren't important, but it helps me stay focused on what truly matters rather than getting lost in the chaos. Movement is another part of my daily routine that brings clarity. Well, to be honest, recently I've been struggling to move daily. But whether it's hitting the gym or going for a swim, moving my body helps me move my thoughts. There's something about physical activity that breaks mental stagnation. When I'm stuck on a problem, I go for a swim, and almost always, by the time I'm done, the solution feels clearer. It's like the act of moving forward physically helps me move forward mentally as well. Then there's the practice of mindful breaks. We often push ourselves to keep going, thinking that if we work harder, we'll achieve more. But clarity often comes in the pauses. I make it a point to take breaks during my day, not just to rest, but to recalibrate. A 5-minute stretch, or simply stepping away from my desk to take a few deep breaths or walk around the room helps me reset. These moments are like mini recharges that help me return to my work with renewed focus. Limiting digital distractions is another essential practice. We live in a hyper-connected world, and while technology has its advantages, it's also a significant source of noise. I've started setting boundaries around my use of technology. No phone first thing in the morning, no scrolling through social media when I need to focus, and setting specific times during the day to check messages. These boundaries help create space for my own thoughts rather than constantly being filled with the noise of others. I've also found value in practicing evening reflection. At the end of the day, I take a few minutes to look back and ask myself, what went well today? What could have been better? What did I learn? It's a simple practice, but it's powerful. By reflecting on the day, I gain insights into my actions, my habits, and my emotions. It helps me see patterns, both positive and negative, that I can either reinforce or work on changing. Evening reflection also helps me go to bed with a sense of closure, knowing that I've acknowledged the day, learned from it, and can let it go. Another practice that has made a significant difference is creating space for play and creativity. As adults, we often forget how important play is for our well-being. Engaging in something creative, whether it's playing with my kids, listening to music, or even just doodling, brings joy and lightness. It's not about being productive. It's about allowing yourself the freedom to express and to enjoy without any pressure. This kind of creative play clears the mental cobwebs and brings a sense of fulfillment that is often missing in our overly scheduled lives. Finally, I want to emphasize the importance of being gentle with yourself. There are days when my routines don't go as planned, days when I oversleep, or when my mind is too restless to meditate, or when I simply don't feel like journaling. And that's okay. The goal isn't perfection. It's consistency. It's about showing up for yourself in whatever way you can, and giving yourself grace when things don't go perfectly. Clarity isn't a destination. It's a journey, and it requires patience, practice, and a lot of self-compassion. These daily practices are not about adding more to an already full plate. They're about intentionally creating moments that bring clarity, that connect you to what truly matters, and that help you navigate the noise of life with a little more ease. It's about finding what works for you and weaving those practices into the fabric of your everyday life. So, as you go about your day, think about the small things you can do to bring more clarity into your life. Start your morning with an intention. Take a sacred pause. Move your body. Reflect in the evening. Remember, clarity is not something that happens to you. It's something you create, one day at a time. I'd like to take a moment to invite you into reflection, because clarity is something that often comes not from the noise around us, but from the questions we ask ourselves. Here are a few reflective prompts that you can use to create space for clarity in your own life. What is one thing in my life that is currently taking up space without adding value? This could be a task, a habit, or even a mindset. Write it down and consider whether it's something you could let go of. What truly brings me joy and fulfillment? Make a list of these things and think about how you can make more room for them in your daily life. The more we focus on what genuinely brings us happiness, the clearer our path becomes. When was the last time I felt truly at peace? Reflect on that moment. What was happening? Who were you with? What elements of that moment can you bring into your everyday routine to cultivate more peace? What is one thing I can subtract from my life today to create more mental space? It might be a small commitment or even just the expectation that you need to be constantly busy. Subtraction can often be the gateway to greater clarity. Clarity isn't just about understanding the world, it's about understanding and accepting ourselves. Write down one way you can be gentler with yourself this week. Use these prompts as a guide. You don't have to answer them all at once. Sometimes the act of simply sitting with a question, without the need to answer it right away, can bring more clarity than any rushed response. Let these questions sit with you, and trust that the answers will come when they're ready. As we continue on this journey of finding clarity, there's an aspect that often goes unspoken, but is profoundly important: trusting your own path. It's easy to look at others, at their achievements, their milestones, their highlights, and feel like maybe we're falling behind, like maybe we're not doing enough. But the truth is, every path is unique, and the only person who can walk your path is you. Trusting your path isn't about being stubborn or refusing to take advice. It's about having faith in your own journey, even when it doesn't look like what you imagined or doesn't match up with societal timelines. There's a story I want to share. A time when I was at a crossroads. I was leaving my established career in pursuit of something that felt more meaningful, but far less certain. It was terrifying. I remember sitting with my thoughts, wrestling with the idea of stepping away from something that was comfortable and understood by everyone around me. Would I fail? Would people think I was making a mistake? Those were the questions swirling in my head. But then I remembered Matthew, as I am regularly doing these days. Your path is your own, and there is no deadline for your dreams. He always said that. This simple truth has become my compass. It has helped me let go of the comparison game and trust that even if I didn't know exactly where I was going, I was moving in the right direction for myself. And that's what trusting your path is all about, having the courage to keep going, even when the way forward is uncertain. Sometimes trusting your path means saying no to what others think you should do. It means listening to your inner voice, even when it contradicts the advice of well-meaning friends, colleagues, or family members. It means understanding that the timeline you're on is yours alone. And while it's true that others may seem to be moving faster, accomplishing more, or following a clearer trajectory, their success doesn't diminish your own progress. There is power in embracing the unknown and taking steps forward even when you can't see the whole picture. When I left my job to build myself, there were moments of doubt, times when I questioned whether I should have stuck with the safe choice, but I also realized that the discomfort I felt was part of the process. It was part of growth, and boy was I right. Every time I chose to move forward, to trust myself, to listen to my instincts rather than my fears, I found a deeper sense of clarity and purpose. So today I want to remind you, your journey is not a race, and there is no set timeline. Trusting your path means allowing yourself the grace to take things one step at a time, to embrace the moments of stillness, and to believe in your capacity to figure it out as you go. Let go of the pressure to have all the answers now, and trust that the answers will come in time. Your path is unfolding exactly as it should, and by trusting it, you are already moving toward the clarity you seek. As we wrap up today's episode, I want you to take a moment to reflect on everything we've explored together. Finding clarity isn't about a single moment of enlightenment, it's about the ongoing choices we make every day, the choices to subtract what no longer serves us, to quiet the noise, to trust our path, and to honor what truly matters. Clarity is not about being perfect or having all the answers. It's about being present, about showing up for yourself, and about creating space to listen to what your heart is telling you. It's about trusting that you are exactly where you need to be, even if it doesn't always feel that way. There's immense power in embracing the unknown, in being willing to sit in the discomfort of uncertainty, and in trusting that your journey is leading you somewhere meaningful. I encourage you to take one small step this week that brings you closer to clarity. Maybe it's spending a few quiet moments in the morning to reflect. Maybe it's letting go of one commitment that no longer aligns with your values. Or maybe it's simply giving yourself permission to pause, to breathe, and to just be. Remember, clarity isn't a destination. It's a journey that unfolds one moment at a time. Thank you so much for joining me today. I hope this episode has given you something to think about, something to reflect on, and maybe even something to act upon. If you've enjoyed our time together, please don't forget to like, subscribe, and comment. I'd love to hear from you. And if you know someone who might benefit from this conversation, please share it with them. Maybe it will resonate with someone who might find value in it. I also invite you to check out my blog, caffeinatedmusings.com, for more of my writing. Until next time, take care of yourself, trust your journey, and keep creating space for what truly matters.